guys, welcome to today's episode of the Girl Get Visible podcast. So, I told you guys we were going to be doing a lot more interviews, and I've got a dynamic one today. Actually, one of our previous guests who's come back to talk about a lot of new things. So, I'm definitely going to link to our last podcast episode because I was re listening to that and it was so good. And then I want you guys, of course, to finish listening to this one and hear the transformation, hear the transition, and hear how it plays right into what we're talking about today, which is about building a team, being an agency owner, and overall leveling up your business. A lot of us I know are or start as solopreneurs or start as working on things. And our guest today, Tasha Booth, she has a long history of doing launch strategies and working with businesses to get their products and services and things out there and building her own agency. And over, I'm just gonna say the last 2, maybe 3 years, it's been like a slow transition. We're friends online, guys. So yes, I know. And both from Jersey, so Jersey girls. But over the last few years, transitioning into not just being her own agency owner, but also helping other businesses and business owners to become agency owners. I know you're working with VAs and OBMs, and then that
Yeah.
stepped into the next. And so I'm really excited to have this conversation, really excited to talk about the journey. And then, of course, for my audience, talk about how you guys can start your journey too. So, Tasha, I'll jump right into it. I know I gave my own intro, but tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and what you're currently doing.
Well, I'm so excited to be here and to be back. So thanks for having me. Yeah, I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico. My husband, Scott, was Air Force for 25 years. He just retired in March. And we are here to stay because we absolutely love Albuquerque. It's very different from New Jersey, as I'm sure you can imagine. But yeah, I am a coach to online agency owners. And I like to say service-based agencies because I work with OBMs, VAs, but I also work with bookkeepers, copywriters, accountants, those sorts of things too. So anybody who has a service, a done for you service, basically that they are offering to clients, I work with them on starting their agency all the way up to scaling their agency to multi 6 and 7 figures. So that's a little bit about me and what I do.
I absolutely love that. And I want to jump right in, especially
Mhm.
for my would-be agency owners, or some of my maybe already there, not really realizing it. How do you
Mhm.
know, or how does a business know when they've officially transitioned from, you're just a solopreneur or small team to a full agency? Like, what's the kind of
Yeah.
transition
I
there?
definitely think that there's a differentiation between having a team and being an agency. And that differentiation is that in an agency model or true agency model, as I like to call it, your team is duplicating you basically. And your team is client facing, they're implementing the same way that you were as a solopreneur. So a lot of times when agency owners first start working with me or solopreneurs moving into agency ownership, they may have a couple team members, but their team members are only in the background, right? Like their clients may not even know that their team exists, and their team members are definitely not talking to their clients. And they feel like, oh, okay, that's going to give me some space, some freedom. And what ends up happening is like they go on vacation and their clients like go silent and nothing gets done because they're still the go-between. They're still the middleman and the bottleneck, right? And so what I like to do is come in and support them in that kind of really difficult and sometimes scary growth place where you are trusting your team to support your clients in the same way you were. So your team members are the ones holding the meetings and being the project managers sometimes and those sorts of things for the clients.
I already learned something. I'm like, oh, not that I thought I was running an agency because we don't do a lot of done for you work, but I thought I was
Uh-huh.
closer than I was. But that key differentiation, I can't even say it. But the key change that you said was when your team is client facing. And
Mm-hmm.
I know my team isn't that. And funny enough, we're on a project that they might need to be. But I realized I have not made that transition. I never even thought
Mm-hmm.
about it that way. So I'm gonna already say thank you.
You are welcome.
So jumping into and kind of further down that road, I feel like I'm about to do a whole masterclass. I probably need a pen to take notes. But how do you even start that? Like, how do you find or where do you find the right team members that you would make client facing?
Yeah, I think that taking your time in finding those team members is key. I know the big mistake that I made when I first started my agency is so my very first team member was a Pinterest manager because back in the day, like 2017, 2018, I was doing a lot of Pinterest management for clients and just feeling overwhelmed with the number of pins I had to do and all that stuff. And so I literally went into like a Facebook group and I probably posted it on my personal page too and said, hey, I'm looking for somebody who knows Pinterest. Like, do you know anybody? Right. And of course, I got like a ton of people who said yes. And I had one friend who like raised her hand and she was like, hey, a friend in the industry. And so she knew Pinterest and I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, you're hired. There was no formal application, interview, any of those things like test project or anything. And it went well because she was a person that I knew in the industry already. But the difference was like, I never had a process really for how to onboard her, how to show her how I wanted pinning to happen inside of my business. And so it was a little bit rocky because there wasn't any process or structure to the hiring. So what I teach now is actually a 3 to 5 step hiring process that includes like making sure that they have the hard skills, but also making sure that they have the soft skills, because you want to make sure that like you're hiring team members who share like similar values to you in terms of how they approach conflict, how they communicate with clients, how they handle hard conversations, all of those things. So I really like the 2 step approach in terms of like making sure that they have the hard skills, but also the soft skills as well. And then of course, doing a test project and having an interview and all of those things as well. So you want to take your time with hiring, I think is the short answer. Or the longer, the short answer to my long answer. The other thing that I wanted to say is that that's one of the reasons why, I don't know even if you know this, Akila, but recently, like early in 2024, I started what's called the agency subcontractor job fair. And I do it about 3 times a year. And the reason was because, yeah, like the hiring process takes a while, And so agency owners kept coming to me and saying, like, oh, the thing that I hate most is like hiring. And like, I always have to hire. And I was like, well, what if I brought like subcontractors to you, like subcontractors that were potentially looking for work within agencies to you. And so we've done it twice. We're about to do it again in January. And basically, it is like speed networking or speed dating, right? And so it's on Zoom, and we have agency owners come in, and they're in breakout rooms, and the subcontractors basically move around rooms to agency owners and have conversations with them and everything. And so kind of it like fast tracks the process a little bit so that agency owners get to meet like 50 to 100 or subcontractors in a matter of 2 hours. So that's been pretty cool as well.
I love that. And I have seen that. I've seen you talk about it and doing something like that. And I love anything that makes a connection. Like we've done the podcast matchmaking, similar
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. But it helps people make that connection, which I feel like online, which is leading to my next question, recruiting online is just so hard. You don't always know
Yeah.
who's doing what stage they are in doing it, what level they are in doing it. So
Mm-hmm.
you kind of almost answered the best ways to recruit. So I'm going to definitely say coming to job fairs like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess going into groups. What are some of the other ways that you recruit?
Yeah, I think groups are definitely like I still advocate and tell people all the time, like go into Facebook groups. There are so many amazing Facebook groups that don't just have virtual assistants. I think that when people think about Facebook groups, they're like, oh, I can find a VA in a Facebook group, but like go to the Facebook groups that have the type of team member that you're looking for. So there are Facebook groups specific for copywriters, graphic designers, social media managers, anything that you're probably looking for to build your team for your agency. Become a member of that group and then let them know that you're looking and hiring. And I would say the other one is like referral partnerships. I think we think of referral partnerships when we think of like getting clients, but also team members as well. When I started my transition from being a agency and a coach to moving into just coaching, so I had some team members that unfortunately weren't going to stay on my team because I didn't need them anymore for the agency side. And so I just posted in a couple Facebook groups that I'm a part of and said, hey, I have these amazing team members. They're looking for some work. Anybody have anything for them? And my 2 top people, or are Danny, my executive assistant, she ended up in 2 teams that I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that I get to like handpick who you're working with because I know that they're great people.
Nice. I love that. Doing that
Yeah.
referral even from the, bringing in people's space. I love that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Another thing you mentioned that I just want to touch on a little bit, because I know funny being in tech and marketing is a sensitive topic on both sides on
Mm-hmm.
projects, right?
Yeah.
So exactly, like that's a thing. Every corporation's like, especially now. I mean, people want full
Mhm.
project plans and things just for the interview. And people feel like, do I do all this work? Should I do all this work? As an agency owner bringing in people, what's a
Mhm.
good expectation around test projects?
First expectation is please pay people for their test projects. So
Ah,
I always pay for test projects. And the people that you are doing it or having do the test projects, this is after you've done the interview, right? So they've gone through one or two applications, they've done the interview process. Like you're down to your top 2 or 3 candidates by the time you're doing a test project. So it's not like you have to pay out for 20 people. Like that would be overwhelming for everyone. So it's not going to be a ton of money that you're spending. I like to do a 1 to no more than 2 hour test project. So you're paying for about 2 hours of their time at most. And then you really want to think in terms of like, what is the core of how I'm going to need them most of the time, right? Of course, there's going to be like tangential things that they're doing in the business, but really think in terms of like, what is the core of their job description? And so, for example, for a social media manager, I had them put together a test project specifically for, and I made sure that it was like, I was very specific about it. I was like, this is a 55-year-old Black woman who is, and talked all about like who she was, who her demographic was. I gave them like a color palette and, a couple fonts to use and like a logo that I made up in Canva, like for in 2 seconds. And so I gave them everything that they would need to set them up for success. And then also wanted to see the creativity that they brought to the project. And so it's so interesting because when I do these test projects, 9 times out of 10, the person that was like my number one person ends up not being the person that I hire because I get to see their actual work on paper, like in real life, and realize that there's somebody else who just has creativity in a different way that I need it, right?
I love that. Definitely love paying for it. So definitely
Yes.
thinking as you're hiring, and people think, oh, hiring's free. There is some budget involved in bringing
Yes.
people on, and just that whole strategy at test project. I know one of the things that I do, and tell me if I'm doing this right or wrong, is I do a lot of hiring content assistants. So I'll say either
Mm-hmm.
write something or give them a topic and ask them to do like some light research. And I even say like, don't read
Yeah.
in an hour and come up with a piece of content. But one of the things I'm very adamant about is guaranteeing them that the content won't appear anywhere else. Like
Mm,
it's not
yeah.
straight up front. Yes, you're going to give me this. I know it's not going to take a ton of time, but I want them to feel comfortable that I'm not going to then go off and use it. Do you recommend
Yeah.
something like that or
Yeah, I would say if you like, honestly, here's what I think. If you're paying for the test project, like, and you want to use it for something, like if you're paying for a test project and it's something internal that you would use anyway, like I think, yes, you've already paid them for their time and their talent, go and use it. If you're not paying for the test project, absolutely 100%, I would make sure that like you let them know and guarantee like this isn't going to be used, because I think that's been the issue with test projects that I've seen coming up lately, that companies and people are asking for things that take 15, 20 hours, a whole week's worth of work and so much research, slide decks and like you were saying project plans and everything. And then they're not hiring anybody, that did that test project and then using their intellectual property. And that is just slimy. But I think if you are paying for it and being upfront about like how you intend to use it in the future, that's how I feel about it. Yeah.
yeah, look, I love that. And I definitely there needs to be more around that because so many problems, like I said, in the tech space,
Yeah.
wanting a lot of work, people not hiring. Sometimes the job wasn't even really a job. Like
Right.
you're just
Yeah.
putting it out there to get like a new strategy or a new plan. And
Hmm.
so it's cruddy. We know it happens, but we want to do better, right? We want to be the
Yeah,
better.
totally.
All right. Next question that came up, and I'm using questions as my audience knows it, so you know too. I'm pulling questions from SEO Assist. We pull some of
Oh,
the questions.
cool.
We have a whole interview flow and pull questions based on what people are asking, out in the
Hmm.
world, right? And make it all nice and SEO friendly. All right. So another question that came up is, can you share a particularly challenging team member, an example of a particularly challenging team member you had to manage and how you handled the situation? And if you don't want to use names, you can kind
Yeah, I
of
will use names, but yeah, there was a team member, and this is interesting because this goes back to like you can do everything right, and it still because is a wrong fit for whatever reason. But we had a team member did both applications, interview, test project, everything was a green light. And then once she like got onto our team and we started like training her on our process on how to be a project manager or launch manager within our team, so much changed. And I think that she had this like aversion to doing it the way that our team did it, like to doing it the way that our agency did it. And so we would reach out to her and say like, hey, like here are the things that we need you to add into this launch project plan that you created. And she'd be like, well, I've been a project manager for a long time and like I've always done it this way. And I'm like, that works when you're a solopreneur and when you're on your own and with your own clients. But when you're working with an entire team who has been trained on this is the level of detail that we expect in a project plan, and like the graphic designer is expecting that, and the copywriter is expecting it, and the social media about everybody else, it's not just about you and what you do or how you do it. And so we kind of went back and forth and like really butt heads with her for a while on that. And finally, I just had to let her go and tell her, like, I can see that you have so much potential as a project manager. And I was excited to like see that potential here at the Launch Guild. And it just seems like you're not a good fit for maybe working in a team environment or an agency environment. So that was a hard one because I was so excited to have her on the team. And then it just changed really quickly.
Yeah. And I hate to say it, and I'm sure I'm going to get judged on this one, but I actually stopped hiring VAs for
Mm,
that reason. And not like
mhm,
all VAs, like I have a VA.
mhm,
Stopped hiring, like I said, career VAs, but like business VAs, like your business
mhm,
doing it this way. Because just about every time I hired someone who was their business as a VA, they wanted, like I had one guy who insisted that I change my social media scheduling platform at the time. Like, oh, this is
mm,
better. And it seemed like every conversation was him selling me on that as opposed
mhm.
to him using what we have. And I'm like, I'm not changing my whole business processes
Yeah.
for you, right?
Yeah. And I
Because
mean,
you're
that's
coming
the other.
in as part of the team, not the team owner, manager, whatever.
Right. Yeah. And I think that like I teach all of my clients, whether it be VAs or whatever else other kind, like this is why you need to be upfront about like what systems you work in beforehand and like what systems you don't work in. Like on the Launch Guild's sales page, like we're very clear about like we work in these launch platforms and we don't work in these launch platforms. So if you work in those launch platforms, we're not the team for you, and we're very clear and like honest about that. But yeah, I think sometimes there's no malleability and there's no like collaborative nature in it. And that's when people on both sides don't feel like they're getting the value for their money, basically.
Thanks. I love that. So, going to transition a little bit back to the
Uh-huh.
owner themselves. What do you say to people who've never managed? I've also run into that.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, myself, I came from being a manager in corporate. So,
Mm-hmm.
I have even interviewing, I have a whole style and things that I do because that's what I did then, and it's
Yeah.
worked with my business. I know a lot of entrepreneurs just aren't there. Like they
Mm-hmm.
either were individual contributors or something like that at their jobs, and so they're not used to managing people. How do you
Yeah.
help them, or what do you say to them to help them transition into now you're going to have to manage team members and maybe do less work, more management than, that transition?
Yeah, I would say first realize that leadership and management are learned skills. Like nobody like comes out of the womb and is an amazing leader and manager. Right?
Some of us
Everybody
want,
has to. Some of them are better. Yes, some of us are a little bit bossier than others, right? But I think everybody has to learn that skill. And so if you start off with like, oh, okay, just like anything else, it's a learned skill and I have to practice that skill and give yourself grace to practice and also like be present to practice that skill, then it works out so much better. And I think also like being cognizant of the things that are kind of maybe like patterns for you that you need to work on. And what I mean by that is a lot of times the agency owners that I work with who are newer agency owners, the thing that is hardest for them is delegation and communicating when there's changes, like giving feedback, giving honest feedback. And
Mm,
so those are the two things that we work on first. I have them write down like a brain dump of all of the things that they're doing that they don't necessarily need to be the one doing. Yes, there's always going to be things that like are your CEO responsibilities, But outside of that, like, let's start practicing handing off 3 things a week to your operations assistant, right? And then once they have those 3 things down, 3 more things, and going back to that list, because maybe delegation isn't the thing that like you're used to, because you're used to have been a solopreneur and doing it all yourself. And then when it comes to the honest conversations or the feedback, a lot of times what ends up happening is maybe the team member doesn't like nail it on the first time. Like, it's not A+ work on the first time in terms of like what your expectation is. And so instead of telling that team member that, they go back and they fix it themselves, or they change it themselves and send it off to the client. You're like, oops, I did that. And then here's what happens with that though. One of 2 things happens. Either the team member starts noticing and they're like, wait, like, do you not like my work? It undermines the team member, or the agency owner gets annoyed after a while and then ends up like firing the team member out of nowhere. And the team member has never been told, given any feedback as to like why their work wasn't A+ work. And so if we can start by showing our team, here's what our expectations are, here's what A+ work in our agency looks like. And then also B, like when our team member brings us B work or B- work, we hop on a 15-minute Zoom call with them, or we send them a Loom video and we say, hey, here are the changes that I'd like to see. Like, let me give you an example, let me show you here what I would change. I want you to go back, do the other changes, and then send it back to me. And yes, that's going to take more time rather than less in the, upfront, but it's going to save you from having to do and redo work for yourself for the rest of your agency life.
I love that. So talking about time, what is like when you think of like the day to day, so like
Mm-hmm.
what is a solopreneur's day look like as opposed to an agency owner's
Mm-hmm.
day look like? Where do you see the difference in how they would allot time? And more so on the agency owner side, like
Yeah,
maybe that
absolutely.
helps give a visual of most people don't want to do all that delegation or do all that management work because they
Mm-hmm.
feel like they're still doing work and now it feels like extra work. But probably
Yeah.
the time management should have been shifted. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think, well, and number one, I think we have to agree that like for a while it's going to be more work rather than less, right? Like you are basically on that seesaw where like you're moving to, from one side of the seesaw to the other, and for a while it's a balancing act and it's going to feel harder rather than easier. I call that the messy middle of agency ownership, right? And so you're going to be in that messy middle where you're still doing a lot of client implementation, you're not out of client work yet, but you're also building this team, you're moving into being a CEO, and it can be overwhelming. The thing that makes it maybe less overwhelming is number one, identifying and understand that this is a season, like you are sprinting for a little bit, but you're not sprinting forever. And then number two, putting in some time blocks and like being purposeful about those time blocks and protecting those time blocks in terms of, this is when I am focused on growing and supporting my team. This is when I am focused on CEO work and growing and supporting my business. And this is when I'm focused on growing and supporting my clients. And so being protective about those time blocks and giving yourself really good boundaries around that is going to help you not feel completely out of control and overwhelmed while you're building your agency.
I love that. And I think that's really
Mm-hmm.
important because a lot of times, we start something, and like I said, like I want to see, but I've got team members, but they're not client.
Mm-hmm.
And I went in kind of thinking about it one way, and even myself, as someone even man who has managed people, didn't think of that
Mm-hmm.
time shift that it's
Yeah.
takes.
Yeah.
Like
It's
I have,
gonna, yeah, I like to there's a African proverb that says, if you want to go far, go alone, or if you want to go fast, go alone, and if you want to go far, go together, right?
like,
And
yeah,
when I think of that about that, I also think about the slowness of it. Like if you want to go fast, like you're going to have to do it on your own, because it's going to take slowing down and teaching and training and supporting team in order to get it right.
I love that. So, next question. How do you measure goals and success for the team and the agency and even yourself? Like, kind of, do you have
Yeah.
guys that you're running, or what do you recommend?
Yeah, I think looking at or figuring out what is your top goal, basically, or maybe top 1 to 3 goals, no more than three, and then basing your KPIs, your key performance indicators, off of what your goals are. And those KPIs are going to change, over time, depending on where your goals lie. We definitely have KPIs within my business. Of course, revenue and profit are going to be two of the top ones for it. But also, when you're thinking about team, a lot of times it's not their responsibility necessarily to create revenue in your business. It's probably going to be your responsibility to go out there and create revenue. But there are metrics that you can hold your team to support, like making sure that those clients are retained. And so thinking about like client happiness score is one of them. Tasks completed on time is another one. You could also like look at, are there team members who are basically like helping to support growing those packages or products that you already have. And so maybe they're having really great conversations every single month with clients, and they notice the things that clients need more support on. And then I can have that conversation with the clients about like, hey, we notice XYZ, we can support you in these ways, right? They're growing the profitability of that package. So looking at those in terms of KPIs. And then of course there's a myriad of ones on the kind of like client acquisition stuff. That's going to, of course, be more CEO related. Or if you end up getting a sales team eventually, or marketing team, more marketing and sales related.
Okay. So now look, I've definitely got a lot of work to do. And I'm not even go a full agency, but apparently I got some holes. Right? Little gaps here and there, which leads to my next and last question of this part, and then we'll do the lightning round. Although I feel like you answered some of our lightning round already. Tools, which is actually one like
Mm-hmm.
I want to specifically talk about tools for team management. I
Yeah.
know we've been through a couple of different tools. We've landed on one. I won't mention it yet, but you can't run a whole tool on Google Workspace. You just can't, like a whole
Please
tool.
don't.
People do, which is why I want to talk about it. But you can't just do everything on, even on Office, like Microsoft Office 365.
Mm-hmm.
While it has more tools for collaboration stuff, it's still, to me, not the best. What are your thoughts?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of tools, as an agency owner, should you start using internally for your business?
Yeah, I think two things sometimes happen. Either agency owners who have been solopreneurs and are moving into agency ownership try to use the same tools, systems that they used when they were solopreneurs, and they realize that it doesn't work, right? Because something that worked if you had even 1 to 3 people on your team versus like 5 to 20 or more people on your team may not be able to grow with you. And then the other thing that happens is that agency owners try to find one tool to do everything, basically what you just mentioned. And I am a person who's like, what is the best tool for the job? Now, sometimes there are things that, like, for example, we used Typeform for a really long time. And then we were like, we're paying like $500 a year for this. And we could just use the Google, like a Google form. And I think that, like, especially because Google like improved their forms and everything, like it was time and it was okay for us to shift. But so there could be things like that you're just like, oh, okay, for the price point, something does it not quite as well but good enough, basically. But there's going to be other things that are just like, no, we need something that is specific for something like communication, or specific for like process management or something like that. So pick the tool that is the best for the job that you need it to do.
That's a good one. Not every company needs, especially as an agency, like needs the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's important too. And so looking at
Yeah.
exactly, we've been through now three.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Especially with project management like platforms, we went through a number before we were finally like, oh, okay, this is the one. And then even after that, and we'll talk about this probably in rapid fire, but even after that, there's been a couple new ones that have come out. And I always say, like, is it going to actually make our team better? Is it actually going to make our, the way that we work better? Or is it just a shiny object that is like the new kid on the block and feels fun?
how do you, and I know this was the last question, but I got one more. How do you
Okay.
handle that transition of implementing new tools in your business? So
Yeah.
like you have
So I
not just you making a change.
Yeah, because well, first of all, I have a conversation with the team, right? So you always should start with a conversation with your team and the pros and cons of changing. And if like most people are just like, oh yeah, this makes sense to change it, because I love tech and like I started off as a tech VA, I'm usually the one to go in and start making it what I want it to look like and what I think would be most helpful for the team. And then we do kind of a team onboarding. Maybe we'll do like an extra team meeting where we talk specifically about how to support and how to use this new tool that we're using. And then of course we do our SOPs and everything, the processes and documentation specifically for that, so that the full team can feel supported in that. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I love that.
Yeah, I love
Let's
it.
jump into the rapid fire. So let's just the lightning
Yes.
questions, and then we'll get into how everyone can find you. And I got some specific like workshop ideas if you don't already have them.
Oh my gosh, yay.
I've always got ideas. And I don't know if I ever told you, I think I told you that back when we were, because we're here on the podcast, we were
Mhm.
refining our podcast process right around the time you were doing some podcast workshops. And I sent my VA at the time to the workshops. I was really good at delegating this day. So I had her attend and I said, get the notes, look at what we're doing, put together our new process. And so the podcast process that we have now that is allowing us to bring back all these episodes is definitely the podcast process that we learned from coming to your workshop. So, kudos to you.
That.
Thank you. Thank you for improving our lives and an
Thank
example
you.
to everyone else to attend those workshops. They're really great. Or send your team.
I love it.
But the lightning round. So, first question, what's a book or some type of reading that you recommend, like a book or a blog that you recommend everyone should follow?
Oh, okay. Hold on. It's over here. All my books over here. The Coaching Habit. The Coaching Habit. I recently, I think you know that I've been doing 75 hard, and so you have to read every day. And so I've really been getting more back into reading. And this book has been the one that I think is changing, like, number one, how I coach, but it's not just for coaches. Anybody who has a team or is managing anybody, or even if you're a parent managing, people in your life and everything, I think should read it because it's great about asking more questions instead of like, feeling like you have to have the answer right away, asking more questions and pulling it out of your team members so that they can take ownership of the task and the responsibility more.
Love that. And most people
Yeah.
don't realize that real coaching, true coaching, I only know this because I've
Mm-hmm.
taken a bunch of coaching things when I was in corporate, because as you level up, they send you to stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
real coaching is not telling people what to do.
Yes.
Real
Mm-hmm.
coaching is asking people and, like you said, getting them to kind of take that journey. That's why I never
Yeah.
call myself a coach, because I'm like, I'm telling you, I'm more of a strategist. I'm gonna tell
Yeah.
you what we need to do. What's
I
gonna
call
need to
myself more
work.
of like a coach,
Um,
coach
I'm gonna
sultant, right?
yeah, I'm gonna ask some questions, but at the end of the day, I'm gonna give you my ideas and thoughts because that's what I do.
I
Um,
love it.
so next question, your favorite quote, and I think you might have just mentioned one, but if you have another favorite
Mm-hmm.
quote that you like live and run your business by.
Yes. So this is one my mom would say to me all the time, and every once in a while she still sends it to me. Keep your feet on the ground and your eyes on the cross. And I think like even if you're not a Christian, like thinking in terms of like just being grateful and being grounded in like in service and support and like your higher whatever your higher self is, I think, yeah, I love it.
I love it too. So thank you, Mom.
Yeah.
Next question, tools. So we talked about tools. So
Mhm.
what's your favorite tool that you live and run your business by?
So a new one that I just started implementing, this comes out of me being ADHD, is Sunsama. Have you heard of the Sunsama app?
No.
So it is a calendar integration. So it integrates with your Google Calendar. But what I love about it is it's a desktop platform that has your calendar for the day, but also has like your to-do list next to it. So you can put in like, this podcast interview and say like, oh, it's going to be 1 hour, and then like float it into your calendar. Or I can be like, start thinking about this project or create the project plan for this project and then pull it into my calendar. So it really gives me not just time blocks that are kind of general, but really specific to specific tasks. And it's really helped my brain.
So I'm definitely going to check that out.
Yes, check it out.
Um, Next last question. Who else do you think I should have on the show?
Oh, who else? Oh, that's a hard one. I know so many people. Have you had,
A lot of same people. I might have had some of them on.
I
So
know.
coming.
Have you had Krista, what's her last name? Wilson on your show?
I have
See,
not.
I will introduce you to her if you don't know her. She does a lot of like DEI leadership, all of those things. And she's so fun too. And she has like the best glasses. She has like a glasses collection of probably 50 to 100 pairs of eyeglasses. And they're all incredible and amazing. I will introduce you to her.
Please do. So we could get her on the show, definitely.
Yes.
And then the absolute last question. What's the question that I should have asked you that I did not ask you today?
Oh, I love this. Well, we've been talking, you and I individually have been talking about my transition into moving from having an agency to being a coach for agency owners. And so yeah, I think about that, maybe about that transition. And maybe, I don't know.
Love it. Let's hear it. So
Yeah.
what made
So,
the transition? What's it been like?
yeah, it's been a long time coming. I know that in 2021, when we had our leadership team meeting, our first in-person leadership team meeting, we kind of talked about moving the personal brand. So I call it the Tasha Booth side of my business, and into being like 50% of the revenue earner, basically for my business. So 50% was going to come from the Launch Guild, 50% from Tasha Booth, and that was kind of our goal for 2022. And then that more quickly than we realized shifted, especially in like late 2023 and all of 2024, into the personal brand being the primary like revenue driver for my business, and me feeling like, oh wow, I'm really enjoying coaching, and I really want to lean into like becoming a better coach, serving and supporting more people in the coaching capacity. And I was feeling less excited about like just marketing and the visibility of the agency. And so finally, like after talking about it with my team for several months, we decided that we were going to sunset the Launch Guild instead of turning it into maybe like a fractional CMO agency or social media agency. We just decided to sunset it. So it was, it was a hard decision, but it was very thought through. And very strategic in terms of where my passions were lying, and me wanting to go with like what felt best.
Okay, so now let's spawn another question. How did you offboard, like, how did you break it to clients that you currently had? Because you had the Launch Guild for a while, and I know you were
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
a lot of really big name companies and businesses and, stuff
Yeah.
like that. So it wasn't just like a see you later kind of deal, I'm sure. So how do
Yeah.
you actually do that transition and get those people, sunset them in that part of the
Yeah. You know what was, I think because we're a launch management agency, what was helpful is that like we work with clients most of the time for like a limited amount of time, right? So for 12 weeks, 16 weeks, 20 weeks, and then we either have a lull with them for a while until their next launch, which sometimes is only like they launch once a year. So we're not going to see them again for another year. And so we kind of just waited until like our lull was happening, and we were just like, okay, we're kind of done. So yeah, so it was, and I have, because I've been in business for a while now, especially like when we think about like ages of online businesses, I've been in business since 2016, early 2017, that I have such a great Rolodex. And so it was a matter of, yeah, we can send you to this person. And honestly, like if somebody amazing came along and was like, hey, I need launch support, like I would just pull my team in and be like, hey, y'all want to do this? And they'd be like, yes, we want to do it. So yeah, so it's not like forever, maybe, but it's just like that is not going to be my primary responsibility or thing that I'm thinking about.
And I love that you mentioned the Rolodex and connections. And I know someone's
Mm-hmm.
listening thinking, how do I get a Rolodex? And I'm going to plug your last episode because you talked about those coffee chats. And
Yes.
you are the queen of coffee chats. So go to the show notes, look for the link for the last episode that we did. And if you're thinking,
Yeah.
"Oh, I grow that
And
Rolodex."
I just did another round of 30 coffee chats in
Oh,
30 days. So yeah, so
how'd that go?
definitely it went so well because this time around I made sure that it was people that I had either never talked to before, like maybe they were friends of, business friends of mine on Facebook, but we had never like gotten on Zoom and talked before, or people that I hadn't talked to in a really long time. And so being intentional about who I was talking to and who I was connecting with, I think for a while, like my circle had gotten a little bit small, and so I needed to widen it again and like just meet new people and have new energy around me. And it was great. It was fantastic.
I love that. Definitely one of those things that I'm always like, I'm going to do it, but I don't know if I'm not saying I'm not personal.
Just do it. Do it.
Okay, putting that on my 2025. So, thank you so much for this. Like so many great like things, call outs, all the good things. Tell us how we can find you. What are your next things? And I'll give you I would hope that please do a workshop on like just hiring practices and that whole
Yeah.
thing. That to me is like a really good, probably like a good way to bring people in. But I know it's one of the things,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the questions I even didn't get to ask you were how to hire, where to hire.
Yeah.
We
Mm-hmm.
talked about that for years. So do a workshop on that, please.
I will consider it for 2025. Yes. But to find me, my website is tashabooth.com. I'm also online on Instagram, mainly at the Tasha Booth. And I love to hang out on Instagram. So definitely come find me. Let's continue the conversation.
This will likely come out before your next event. So you want to plug that and tell us about
Yeah. So
how
yeah, my next
your business is
agency.
hiring.
Thank you. Yeah. So my next agency subcontractor job fair is happening on January 22nd. You can go to tashabooth.com/job fair, all one word, tashabooth.com/job fair to get all the info. And we are actually through, I don't know when this is coming out, but through the end of the year, we're doing a special specifically for those subcontractors. And so you can get early bird pricing. And then this time around, early January, I'm doing a workshop for agency owners who sign up for the job fair, and I'm doing a separate one for subcontractors on how to set themselves up for success. Because I know a lot of the subcontractors that come, they're like, this is my first time speed networking. Like, what questions are, like, what should I say? So we're going to run through all of that in a workshop happening January 8th for those who have registered before the 31st. So I'm excited about that because I really think that that will help them shine and kind of, feel confident as they're going into the job fair.
Yes. Now, just because you gave those dates, we're not going to push this up. We're going to make sure that everybody gets
Thank
this.
you.
And all these links that we just talked about will definitely be in the show notes. And if for some reason you're listening after this, still check the links because I know Tasha's team, they always redirect to what to do next. And there's always a next step. So thank you again for being on. Absolutely always love our conversations. And thank you for the value you just shared with us.
Thank you.